Did you know the steel industry worldwide accounts for about 7% of global emissions? And when we talk about fighting climate change, combating climate change, going greener, going cleaner, we need to start with this industry. Now, a very interesting part of this is who is going to pay for the transition of the steel industry to go clean, especially in India. And to speak about this, I'm sitting down with the boss of one of the biggest steel companies in India, in fact, the group which creates steel and cement. I have with me Joint MD of JSW, Seshagiri Rao, today, participating in our series on Green Warriors. Mr. Rao, thank you so much for speaking with us here at ET Now. Let me start by asking you to set the context for this conversation. I mean, recently we had a quote from Mr. Jindal speaking at an event where he outlaid the challenges that the steel industry would face to go green, along with a commitment to go green. So let me start with the commitment bit first.
Yes. As far as steel industry is concerned, it is a very hard to abate sector. It is very difficult to replace the coke, which is used as a reductant and also as a fuel for producing steel. To replace it with the alternative energy is very difficult. That's why it is considered as hard to abate sector. But at the same time, the kind of initiatives the steel sector globally is taking to reduce carbon emissions and to produce green steel is a very, very large initiatives that are being taken. Coming to JSW Steel is concerned, so in line with whatever nationally made commitments by India, in line with that, where India has committed that the carbon emissions intensity to GDP will be reduced by 33 to 35% over 2005. So by 2030. So we also accordingly worked out the numbers. So our commitment is to reduce carbon emissions for JSW Steel over 2005 by 42%. So because of a very comprehensive sustainability policy, not just reducing carbon emission, we take waste utilization, waste generation, and water usage, and also air pollution, and biodiversity. On all these points, we have prepared a very, very comprehensive sustainability policy and communicated to all the investors, shareholders, and all the stakeholders. That is our plan by 2030. In each of these parameters, this is what we would like to be by 2030. When you compare with the nationally determined contributions by India, or whatever paper that has been given by Ministry of Steel to Ministry of Environment, where Indian steel industry has to reduce carbon emissions by 1% every year, starting from 2005. The Indian International Agency, whatever they have made as sustainability development scenario, that the carbon emissions by steel industry in India should be 2.18 by 2030. In any of these parameters, if you look at it, we are far ahead of that. Very ambitious targets JSW Steel has taken. So we have communicated that we will achieve the 1.95 carbon emission by every ton of steel which we are producing by 2030. To achieve that 1.95, we are also taking a series of steps. What we should do in each year, starting from 2020 onwards. Thereby, we will be able to not only achieve, even exceed this target which we have set for 2030. There is a lot of capital expenditure.
I will come to that.
We have been incurring to achieve this.
I will come to the question of capital expenditure. So, if I could just recap the targets. So, we're ending 2021. We basically have 8 years to hit the goal. So, per year, if you were to break it down in percentage terms, what would be the reduction in carbon emissions?
We are at 2.52 as on 31st March 2021 financial year. There is a carbon emission per ton of steel which we are producing. That we have set a target to reduce it to 1.95 by 2030. That means we are reducing by 55 basis points, 57 basis points, which is 23% over a period of 9 years. So approximately it is 2.5% every year we are reducing. Whereas Ministry of Steel commitment is to reduce by 1% every year.
Okay.
So relative to that, I think we are very aggressive and ambitious in reducing carbon emissions.
Now for the big question, how much will it cost? What is the capital expenditure set aside for this? And how do you look at this big question? Because the world over, that is the key question, isn't it? That is it viable to go green?
So the issue is 27% of the total steel capacity in the world. They have committed to do a net zero emission by 2050. That is a commitment several companies have made. But many of these companies are located in the developed world, not in developing country like India. So the issue here remains when 10% of the population who are living in the developed world, starting from 1990 to 2015, when they have emitted total 50% of the carbon emissions in the world, the rest of the world is still struggling. If you look at the 50% of the poorest population in the world, they contributed only 7% of the carbon emissions during this period. Therefore, if the developing economy like India, if they have to energy transition to a cleaner world, then there is a huge amount of capital expenditure and also operating expenditure to be incurred. Just to give you an idea, today if I look at carbon, which is traded in Europe, it is almost close to $70 for every ton of carbon if you want to buy the certificates. So that means if steel industry is emitting approximately 2 tons of carbon, that means the shadow cost which is involved is $140 to $150 per ton of carbon emitted, per ton of steel. So if that is the kind of cost which is required to be incurred, either operating expenditure or fixed or capital expenditure, then it is very difficult for any company to incur that type of capital expenditure. Particularly a company which is located in a developing economy like India. So there should be a carbon financing which is required to be given at a grant or at a concessional rate. A hand-holding is required by the developed countries where they have emitted earlier. They have already become a developed country today to India, and thereby the government will be able to extend this type of carbon financing to companies like us, where we will be able to transition much faster than what the world is looking forward.
So $140 to $150 per ton is the cost. I want to come to the whole debate about developed worlds financing this, but I just want to link it to what you said earlier with your 2030 targets. So what is the plan as of today while all of this carbon financing gets sorted out? What is the capital expenditure you will be putting in?
As far as we are concerned, we are incurring close to 10,000 crores of rupees in this carbon transition. For instance, in the case of Orissa, where we have our mines, iron ore mines, we are setting up beneficiation plants and slurry pipelines to improve the quality of the ore that is used in the furnace. For instance, if quality of the inputs which goes into the furnace are bad or inferior, then you go to consume more fuel, you consume more emission. Therefore, we are focusing on improving the quality of input that goes into the furnace, whereby it consumes less fuel and less carbon emission. So, in that we are spending almost close to 3,450 crores of rupees in setting up beneficiation plants, slurry pipelines, and also our own equipment for mining, plus digitization. This is the expenditure which we are incurring in terms of improving the quality of the inputs. Over and above that, we are also trying to replace the fossil fuel based power with the solar power.
Okay.
So we are now spending close to 2,500 crores of rupees, one of our group companies, to set up 1,000 megawatts of solar power in the state of Karnataka and also in the state of Maharashtra and in the state of Tamil Nadu. So which can really replace the fossil fuel power. So that will again reduce the carbon emission. The third way which we are trying to do as a measure to reduce the carbon emissions is to increase the use of scrap in the overall steel making. Today it is around 6 to 7%. We wanted to increase by another 10%. So that will reduce the carbon emissions. Like that, the series of measures which we have taken, where there is a capital expenditure which is involved, but there is a benefit in terms of overall cost reduction also which will happen. But there is a initial capital expenditure which we need to commit to achieve this goal.
So, is the outlook that eventually this capital expenditure will be worth it? Is going green making good business sense eventually?
It will definitely make good business sense. For instance, when we wanted to achieve 1.95, an ambitious goal of carbon emissions, then we have done a sustainability linked index bond, sustainability linked bond in the global markets. So it is almost close to $500 million. It has given a very good response. And we have got a very good interest rates when securing the financing. So therefore there is financing available in the global markets, but that is at an interest rate which we need to pay. So there is a cost involved in doing that. That is why I am talking about, is there any possibility by the developed countries extending their helping hand for a developing country like India to do grant or to do concessional financing, then this transition can be expedited in India in particular.
So, let me come to another aspect that was spoken about by Mr. Jindal recently at this event, which was to have hydrogen-based power. Tell me, what are the challenges there? What are the challenges to actually achieve this? Because this seems to expedite the whole process.
No, today hydrogen, if we have to make from in the greener manner, that is using the renewable power to generate hydrogen, to produce hydrogen, and also its transportation. Then its cost in the industry is very, very high. It is more than $100 per every ton of steel produced if you have to use hydrogen and replace the coke, in addition to the capital costs that are involved. So it is very expensive today to use hydrogen. Number two is how to produce hydrogen such a large scale. Because if you see the electrolyzers, the capacity which is there today and also its efficiency is very limited. So new technologies have to develop eventually to replace the coke with hydrogen. So pending the replacement of hydrogen because of its affordability by the industry, there are several other steps which the companies and countries are taking. If I look at the USA today as a part of their 1.75 trillion spending plan, they announced a scheme, any coal-based power plant, if they set up facilities for carbon capture, use and storage, they will pay $85 per ton to that particular company, which incurs that capex. So they are not saying coal they will phase out. They are saying coal-based power plants can continue to operate even in the USA, but they are saying they will pay $85. You have to capture the carbon and use it and store it. Sequestration, basically. Similarly, in India, that type of opportunity should be available. Then we can reduce there is no carbon that is emitted, but still coal-based power plants continue to operate because we can set up facilities to capture carbon, use it or store it in a manner that it doesn't harm the environment. Then carbon emissions will be zero only. So I think this is how the developed economies are moving, pending the affordability of hydrogen through new technologies come in. At the same time, USA also has set a goal that it will be one. So in the next 1 decade, they wanted to make hydrogen $1 per 1 kg. Whereas today it is almost $6-7 per kg. So it is very expensive. It is not possible to replace the existing fuels with the hydrogen completely. So I think in the next decade there are a lot of changes that can come in. Then we can inject hydrogen into blast furnace in lieu of the coke. Then we will be able to be very, very clean. So until that time, the steps which we are taking, the levers which we are using, efficiency levers, like improving the quality of the inputs, capturing all the heat that is coming in within the steel plant, and alternatively increasing the scrap usage and replacing the fossil fuel based power with solar power. So they are the things which we are doing to reduce. In addition to carbon capture and usage, there is another thing. Again, there is a lot of capital expenditure involved there. So there is where again the same point of carbon financing.
So now let me come to the big question of carbon financing. In the near term, who do you think needs to step up and do it? Where is this going to come from? Because the larger debate that you're referring to, Mr. Rao, which we saw at the COP26 recently, is on a global scale, where developed countries are being asked that question, that will you right historical wrongs? Will you put up the money? And those negotiations are on. The question is, do we have that much time as a people before climate change really starts wreaking havoc? So what would you hope for in terms of immediate steps?
Well, when the commitment is made as a part of the Paris Agreement in 2015 that $100 billion every year will be extended to the developing economies by the developed countries through a mechanism to transition to cleaner economy. Well, nothing is done up to 2021. Even 2021, the debate still remained unanswered. So it is estimated that 2023 onwards, this 100 billion per annum will be extended through a mechanism to the developing economies. So they will be able to access this capital and extend to the companies by way of a grant or concessional financing to transition very, very quickly. Until that time, I think the way I was trying to explain how to improve the quality of the existing operations and then reduce the emissions. It's not possible to completely eliminate. And slowly, gradually, CCUS or biodiversity, through those methods, we have to go into becoming net zero by 2070. That is what India has committed. In that direction, we need to move.
The response to that commitment by a lot of global climate activists was, it's too far out. 2017 net zero emissions is too wide a target. It needs to be a stronger one. I put that question to you as well. The targets you've set for yourself till 2030, the amount of capex you've talked about, 10,000 crores. Some may argue that a lot more needs to be done. What would you say to that?
No, as a developing country like India, when compared to others, like China has committed 2060, whereas most of the countries are talking about 2050. Compared to them being a 2.7 trillion economy as far as India is concerned, and majority of the population is struggling to meet both the ends. So therefore 2070 I think is a very ambitious target, the way the India has committed, India has announced in the COP26. Therefore I think it is a very realistic and achievable target as far as 2070 is concerned. Even to do that, I think there are huge amount of capital expenditure to be spent for energy transition. So for which I feel that the government of India should take a very, very strong steps and take up very strongly with the developed countries to extend this financing to India and other developing countries.
What is the kind of help the industry needs right now from the government?
The point is, for instance, Europe is talking about carbon border adjustment tax, which they wanted to introduce starting from 2026-27. But the way I see that is, this carbon border adjustment tax mechanism should not be used as a protection measure, where they stop the trade, entering into Europe and use this not as an environmental policy tool, but as a tariff tool for restricting the trade from rest of the world. If they take those steps, there will be retaliatory measures of that nature from other countries also. So it will impact the global trade very much. So therefore, in my view, before such steps are taken, there should be first a robust mechanism. How do you measure as regards to the overall carbon intensity in a product or a service when it has to be traded? And who has to certify as far as the total content of carbon emission that is done by that particular product or service? Then if a tariff has to be done, how it can be used in a fair and transparent manner than just as a tool to introduce that. Because we have seen what happened when US introduced Section 232 safeguard measure. Every country has put tariffs. So entire global trade got affected. So my real fear is it should not lead to that situation going forward. Therefore, as India, I think we should take it up very strongly as regards to the carbon border adjustment tax and its mechanism, how it will operate, and how India's interests can be protected. because we are looking at a very large export of merchandise. We are talking about $1 trillion of exports from current $400 billion approximately. So if you have to do that much of export of merchandise, then we should be very conscious of what other countries are doing, particularly developed countries, in terms of this border adjustment tax, carbon border adjustment tax.
You were speaking a little while ago about the challenges of hitting these green targets as a steelmaker in a developing nation. And I want to talk to you about the dichotomy here, because our internal targets for steel manufacturing are only growing. We need to produce more steel. We need to increase the share of manufacturing as a portion of GDP.
Yes.
We need to grow our economy, and more steel plants come as a part of it. You've gone in for major capital expansion as well.
Right.
So how are you going to balance that with sustainability goals?
Sustainability and carbon emission reduction is at the core of our expansions. So when we are negotiating even for the procurement of our equipment for our expansion plans, we have been talking with our suppliers that when compared to the equipment which we bought few years back when we were doing it, what are the new measures they have taken in terms of digitalization, automation and carbon emission reduction, energy intensity is concerned. Even if it is costing a little more to us when compared to the earlier systems, so we are paying that extra cost and ensuring that the equipment is modern and we will be able to reduce the carbon emissions. So how we are looking at it. And at the same time, it is not possible to completely transition to hydrogen-based economy for the reasons which I just explained to you. So that's why it should be possible. The equipment which we are buying, it should be retrofitting as and when the new technology affordable for using hydrogen in the place of coke. So that kind of retrofitting flexibility in the equipment which we are buying, but also we are trying to negotiate at the time of buying. So these are the things which we are really working on to ensure that the equipment which we are buying is more modern and technologically advanced, and we will be able to flexibly change as and when the new technology comes in to use new fuels.
And when are you going to be ready to declare a zero emissions target?
We are working on now, at least we have done by 2030 what we will be. That itself is considered as very ambitious relative to what we were in 2005. I think huge amount of steps the company has taken. So recognizing what we have done already, we have been awarded the leadership band by CDP. This when compared to the average of the entire industry in Asia, which is considered as B average, whereas we are A minus, that is the rating which we have got. So whatever disclosures we are making, whatever steps we have taken so far, it is very well recognized. The company has been included in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. So I think there are a lot of things which the industry and the outside world and the investors are recognizing. So we are moving very fast in terms of overall sustainability goals are concerned.
But there's a while for that one zero emissions target.
I think it will take some more time by the time we announce that. Whereas at least we are now looking at how do we replace entire fossil fuel based power with solar power.
Yeah.
That is where we are working. India has an advantage. We have a huge amount of sunshine. So we will be able to produce solar at a very good cost. So our group company JSW Energy has been working on that. So I think in the next few years time, we wanted to replace our fossil fuel based power completely with solar power. That is how we are working on right now.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Rao, for sitting down with us and talking about your plans towards producing greener steel and, of course, contributing to the battle against climate change.
Thank you. Thank you so much.